The engines roared, the cabin braced, then everything lurched to a halt. A Boeing Heavy slammed its brakes on the runway, stunning hundreds of passengers who had no idea why their takeoff just died on the tarmac. In seat 2A, a 19-year-old black teen sat motionless as a wealthy woman's voice cut through first class, accusing him of a crime that could end his life before it even began. Phones were out. Whispers spread. She believed money made truth optional. What she didn't know, what made this moment explosive, was that the cockpit had been listening. The pilot had heard every word. And instead of pushing back, he chose to investigate. The flight wouldn't leave on time. Justice would. The rain at JFK International Airport was relentless, hammering against the reinforced glass of Terminal 4 like thousands of tiny, angry fists inside the exclusive first-class lounge. However, the storm was nothing more than ambient noise, a soft backdrop to the clinking of crystal flutes and the rustling of the Financial Times. Rowan Holley sat in the corner of the lounge trying to make himself as small as possible in the oversized leather armchair. At 19, Rowan still had the lanky frame of a teenager who hadn't quite grown into his height. He was wearing a charcoal grey hoodie, black joggers, and a pair of worn-in retro Jordans. To the untrained eye, he looked like a kid who had gotten lost on his way to the food court. To the staff of the lounge who had scanned his digital boarding pass moments ago, he was a priority one passenger. He checked his phone. A text from his mom. "Text me when you land in London. So proud of you, baby. Don't let them intimidate you." Rowan smiled faintly. He wasn't intimidated, not exactly. He was just tired. The last 48 hours had been a whirlwind of meetings in Silicon Valley, followed by a red-eye to New York. And now, this connecting flight to London for the TechCrunch Disrupt conference. Flight 919 to Heathrow is now boarding for first and business class passengers. The announcer's voice chimed smooth as silk. Rowan grabbed his backpack, a battered North Face that had survived 4 years of high school and his freshman year at MIT, and stood up. He joined the queue. Standing directly in front of him was a woman who radiated a very specific kind of icy wealth. She was petite with a bob of hair so blonde and stiff it looked like a helmet made of spun gold. She wore a cream-coloured Chanel suit that probably cost more than Rowan's tuition, and she clutched a crimson Hermes Birkin bag like a weapon. This was Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the wife of a real estate tycoon, a socialite in Manhattan's Upper East Side, and a woman who had never heard the word no without immediately demanding to speak to a manager. As the line moved, Eleanor fumbled with her passport and boarding pass. She dropped her scarf, a delicate silk thing. Rowan, instinctively polite, bent down. "Ma'am, you dropped this." Eleanor spun around, her eyes widening as if he had just brandished a knife. She looked at the scarf in his hand, then up at his face, her lip curling in a mix of confusion and disgust. She snatched the scarf from him without touching his skin. "Be careful," she snapped. "That is pure silk." "Just trying to help," Rowan said, his voice level. She looked him up and down, her gaze lingering on his hoodie. "The economy line is that way," she said, pointing a manicured finger toward the chaotic mass of people at the adjacent gate. "You're in the priority lane. You're blocking the entrance for actual customers." The gate agent, a patient man named David, looked up. "Ma'am, please scan your ticket." "I am scanning it." Eleanor huffed, turning back to the scanner. "But you really should have security manage the queue better. People are just wandering in." She scanned her pass. Beep. She breezed through. Rowan stepped up. He placed his phone on the scanner. Beep. Eleanor, who had paused just a few feet down the jet bridge to adjust her bag, froze. She turned her head, watching as David smiled at Rowan. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Holley. Seat 2A." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She didn't move. She waited until Rowan walked past her on the narrow jet bridge. The air was cold, smelling of jet fuel and rain. "Employee pass?" she asked loudly as he passed her. Rowan kept walking. "Excuse me, you must be an employee dependent," she said, catching up to him, her heels clicking aggressively on the metal floor. "Or did you get bumped up because the flight was overbooked? That's the only way someone dressed like that ends up here." Rowan adjusted his backpack strap. I bought a ticket just like you. Elena let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. I highly doubt it was just like me. They reached the door of the aircraft. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Sarah with impeccable posture and a warm smile, greeted them. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Vance. Good to see you again, and welcome, Mr. Holley. Let me show you to your suite. The first-class cabin on the Boeing 777 was a sanctuary of beige leather and walnut wood trim. It wasn't just seats. These were individual suites with sliding privacy doors. Your seat is here 2A, Sarah said, gesturing to the window suite on the left. And I'm where? Elena demanded. You are in 2F, Mrs. Vance, across the aisle. Eleanor stopped dead. She looked at the luxurious suite at 2A, then at her own, then at Rowan, who was already sliding his backpack into the overhead bin. There must be a mistake. Elena whispered harshly to Sarah, leaning in close. I cannot sit there. Is there a problem with the seat mechanism, Mrs. Vance? Sarah asked, concerned. The problem, Elena hissed loud enough for the first few rows of business class to hear, is the view I don't pay $12,000 to sit across from a thug in a hoodie. It makes me feel unsafe. The cabin went quiet. Rowan froze, his hand still on his bag. He slowly lowered his arm and turned to face her. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. I assure you, Mrs. Vance, Sarah said, her smile straining at the edges. Mr. Holley has gone through the same TSA security as everyone else. He is a valued customer. I don't care what TSA says. I know trouble when I see it. Elena said, raising her voice. She glared at Rowan. Look at him. He's probably scouting for things to steal while we sleep. I want him moved. Put him in the back where he belongs. Rowan took a deep breath. He thought of his mother. Don't let them intimidate you. I'm staying right here, Rowan said calmly. He sat down in the leather seat and buckled his belt. I have work to do. Elena turned a shade of crimson that matched her bag. She looked at Sarah. If you don't move him, I will file a formal complaint against you and this entire airline. Do you know who my husband is? Robert Vance of Vance Global. One phone call and you'll be serving peanuts in a bus station. Sarah stiffened. Mrs. Vance, please take your seat. We are delaying boarding. Elena huffed, slamming her bag onto her seat. Fine, but I want the captain informed that I am under duress. She sat down, but she didn't close her privacy door. She kept it wide open, her eyes fixed on Rowan like a hawk watching a mouse. The boarding continued, but the atmosphere in the cabin had curdled. The air was electric with tension, and the flight hadn't even pushed back yet. 10 minutes passed. The cabin filled up. A tech CEO occupied seat 1A, and a famous Broadway actress was in 1F. They both pretended to read, but their eyes kept darting toward row 2. Rowan pulled out a sleek sticker-covered laptop. It wasn't a standard MacBook. It was a custom Linux build, thick and industrial. He opened a terminal window lines of code, scrolling rapidly down the screen as he ran a diagnostic on his presentation for London. Across the aisle, Elena watched him typing. To her, the black screen with green text didn't look like work. It looked like hacking. It looked criminal. Sarah, the flight attendant, returned with a silver tray. Pre-departure beverage, Mrs. Vance. We have the Dom Perrin, Clears Throat, 2012. Yes, Elena said, snatching the flute. God knows I need it. Sarah turned to Rowan. She softened her expression clearly. Clears throat. Feeling terrible about the earlier outburst. And for you, Mr. Whole Champagne, or perhaps a mimosa. Rowan looked up and smiled politely. No, thank you. Just some orange juice, please. Elena scoffed. A loud, wet sound. Of course. Can't handle the good stuff, or just not old enough to drink legally. Rowan ignored her. Orange juice is fine, Sarah. Thank you. When Sarah returned with the juice in a crystal glass, she placed a small bowl of warm nuts on Rowan's side table. Let me know if you need anything else, Rowan. Actually, Elena interrupted, her voice shrill. I need something. Sarah turned. Yes, Mrs. Vance. I need to know why the airline is giving away seats to charity cases. Elena said. She wasn't whispering anymore. She wanted the whole cabin to hear. She swirled her champagne. It ruins the brand. You know we pay for exclusivity. We pay to be away from the riffraff. The man in 1A, the tech CEO, lowered his noise-cancelling headphones. He looked annoyed. Ma'am, could you keep it down? We're trying to relax. Elena turned on him. Oh, don't you play the saint. You're thinking it too. You see a boy like that dressed in street clothes typing on some suspicious computer, and you don't wonder he's probably a drug dealer who got lucky, or he's using a stolen credit card. Rowan stopped typing. His fingers hovered over the keys. The accusation of the stolen credit card hit a nerve. He closed his laptop slowly. My name is Rowan, he said, turning his head to face her directly. And I run a cybersecurity firm. I'm going to London to speak on quantum encryption. I paid for this ticket with my own money. Now please stop talking to me. Elena's eyes bulged. She hadn't expected him to be articulate. She hadn't expected him to fight back. It only made her angrier. Don't you dare speak to me with that tone, she spat. Cybersecurity, please. That's just a fancy word for internet fraud. I see right through you. She pressed the call button. Ding. Sarah appeared instantly. Yes, Mrs. Vance, he's threatening me. Elena lied smoothly. He just threatened me. Sarah blinked. I was standing right there. Mrs. Vance, I didn't hear a threat. Are you calling me a liar? Elena's voice rose to a shriek. He looked me in the eye and said, I better stop talking or else. I want the pilot. I want the pilot right now. Mrs. Vance, we are about to push back. The boarding door is closed. Sarah said, her patience wearing thin. Please lower your voice. I will not. I am unsafe. Elena stood up. She was small, but her fury made her seem larger. She pointed a shaking finger at Rowan. Get him off this plane now, or I will scream until the police come. Rowan looked out the window. The rain was streaking harder now. He felt a knot of humiliation tightening in his chest. Even here in first class with his own company with millions in the bank, he was still just a suspect to people like her. Ma'am, sit down. A stern voice came from the front. It wasn't Sarah. It was the first officer who had poked his head out of the cockpit due to the noise. What is going on back here, officer? Elena cried out, acting the damsel in distress. This individual is harassing me. He's making threats. I refuse to fly with him. Remove him. The first officer looked at Rowan, who was sitting quietly with his hands in his lap, and then at the red-faced woman holding a glass of champagne. We are 5 minutes from departure, the first officer said firmly. If you cannot settle down, we will have to return to the gate, and nobody wants that. Then move him, Eleanor bargained. Move him to economy. Then I'll be quiet. I can't downgrade a passenger who paid for first class, the officer said. Then I will make sure this is the worst flight of his life. Elena muttered, sitting back down and chugging the rest of her champagne. The first officer shared a look with Sarah, shook his head, and went back to the cockpit. The plane jolted. The tug had engaged. They were pushing back. Rowan put his headphones on, trying to drown her out. He thought it was over. He thought she would just sulk for 7 hours. He was wrong. Ellen Vance was just getting started. She began rummaging through her heavy Birkin bag. Her movements frantic and jerky. She pulled out a makeup bag, a tablet, a scarf. Then she stopped. She patted her wrist. She gasped. A theatrical, loud gasp that cut through the drone of the engines. My bracelet, she shrieked. My diamond tennis bracelet. It's gone. She stood up again, unbuckling her seatbelt while the plane was moving. Stop the plane. He stole it. He stole my bracelet. The reaction was instantaneous. Sarah, the flight attendant, lunged for the interphone to call the cockpit, but she didn't need to. The screaming was loud enough to penetrate the reinforced door. Stlen, he's a thief! Elena shrieked, standing in the aisle, her face twisted into a mask of righteous panic. My diamond bracelet. It was vintage Cartier. It's gone. The plane lurched violently. Captain James Anderson, a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience, slammed on the brakes. The massive Boeing 707, which had been taxiing at a steady 15 mph, shuddered to a halt so abrupt that the overhead bins rattled and the china in the galley clattered to the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," the first officer's voice came over the PA system, sounding tense. "Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are stopping the aircraft due to a disturbance in the cabin." The silence that followed was suffocating. The engine spooled down to a low idle. The hum of the air conditioning, the only sound besides Elena's theatrical hyperventilating. Rowan sat frozen in seat 2A. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He knew exactly what this looked like. He knew the statistics. A young black man in a hoodie. A wealthy white woman screaming about stolen jewelry, and a plane full of people who just wanted to go home. He kept his hands visible, resting them on his knees, palms open. It was a survival instinct he had learned before he even learned to drive. "Mrs. Vance," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly as she unbuckled her jumpsy seat harness and approached. "Please sit down. The plane has stopped. You are endangering yourself." "I don't care about the plane," Elena yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Rowan. "I want my property back." "He took it. I saw him reach over when I was looking for my iPad." "That is a lie," Rowan said, his voice deep and surprisingly steady, though his stomach was churning. "I haven't left my seat since I boarded. I haven't even unbuckled my belt." "You are a liar," Elena spat. "You people are all the same. You see something shiny, and you just take it because you think the world owes you something." The racial undertone wasn't an undertone anymore. It was a sledgehammer. Mr. Sterling, the tech CEO in seat 1A, unbuckled his belt and stood up. He was a tall man in a bespoke suit. "Hey," he said, looking at Elena. "That's enough. I've been watching him. He hasn't moved." Elena whirled on him, her eyes wild. "Oh, are you in on it? Is this a team effort? Did you distract to me?" While he grabbed it, Sterling threw his hands up, exasperated. "Lady, you are out of your mind. I want the police." Elena screamed toward the cockpit door. Captain." The cockpit door clicked and hissed open. Captain Anderson stepped out. He was an imposing figure, 6'2", with silver hair and stripes on his shoulders that commanded instant respect. He put his hat on, adjusting the brim, and surveyed the chaotic scene in his first-class cabin. "What," Anderson said, his voice low and dangerous, "is the meaning of this? Why are we screaming when we should be taking off?" Elena rushed toward him, grabbing the sleeve of his uniform. "Captain, thank God. You have to arrest him. That boy in 2A, he stole a $50,000 bracelet from my wrist while I was asleep." "You weren't asleep," Mrs. Vance, Sarah interjected bravely. "You were drinking champagne and arguing with the gentleman in 1A. "I dozed off," Eleanor insisted, tears now streaming down her face. Tears that appeared with suspicious speed. I woke up and felt a tug, and he was pulling his hand away. And now it's gone. "Please, Captain. It was a gift from my late mother. It's all I have left of her. It was a masterful performance." Even Rowan, watching her, felt a flicker of doubt. She sounded so heartbroken. If he didn't know for a fact that he was innocent, he might have believed her too. Captain Anderson looked at Elena, then at Rowan. He walked slowly over to seat 2A. "Son," the captain said, his tone neutral. "Did you take the lady's bracelet?" Rowan looked the captain in the eye. "No, sir. I did not. I have my own money. I don't need hers." "He's lying." Elena shrieked from the galley. "Check his bag. Check that filthy backpack. I bet it's stuffed in there with the drugs." The captain sighed. He looked at his watch. They were already burning fuel and missing their slot. The airport authority would be furious, but he couldn't take off with a felony accusation active in the cabin. Sarah, the captain, said, "Call the tower. Tell them we are returning to the gate. We have a security issue that requires law enforcement." A collective groan went up from the business class section behind the curtain. People began pulling out their phones, filming. Rowan saw the lenses poking through the curtains. He was about to be viral. He was about to be the face of a crime he didn't commit. "We aren't just going back to the gate." Elena said, a smug smile flickering through her tears as she looked at Rowan. "We are going to jail." The taxi back to the gate felt like a funeral procession. The rain had intensified, drumming a melancholy rhythm on the fuselage. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was toxic. Elena sat in her seat, dabbing her eyes with a napkin, occasionally shooting venomous glares at Rowan. Rowan stared out of the window. He was texting his lawyer. "I need help. JFK false accusation of theft on a plane. Police are coming." He didn't text his mum. He couldn't break her heart like that. She thought he was flying to success, not into a cage. The plane docked. The seatbelt sign pinged off, but nobody moved. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Anderson announced, "please remain seated. Port Authority police will be boarding the aircraft shortly to resolve the issue in the forward cabin. We apologize for the delay." 2 minutes later, the heavy cabin door swung open. The cold, wet air from the jet bridge rushed in, followed by 3 officers from the Port Authority Police Department. They were big men wearing tactical vests and serious expressions. "Who's the complainant, the lead officer?" a sergeant named Miller asked. "I am Elena," stood up waving her hand. "Eleanor Vance, I am the victim, and the suspect him." She pointed a manicured finger at Rowan. "The one in the hoodie. He has my diamond bracelet." Sergeant Miller looked at Rowan. "Sir, please stand up and step into the aisle. Keep your hands where I can see them." Rowan unbuckled slowly. He stood up. He towered over the officer, but he slumped his shoulders to appear less threatening. "Officer, I didn't take anything." "Turn around," Miller said. "Hands on your head." "Is this necessary?" Mr. Sterling asked from seat 1A. "He hasn't done anything. I've been here the whole time." "Sir, please stay out of this," Miller snapped. He patted Rowan down. The search was thorough and aggressive. They checked his pockets, his waistband, his ankles. They made him take off his shoes. Rowan stood in his socks on the airplane carpet, feeling the eyes of every passenger on him. He felt stripped of his dignity. He was a CEO. He was a genius coder. But right now, he was just a suspect. Nothing on his person. Miller said. "It's in the bag," Elena insisted, stepping closer. "He put it in that backpack. I saw him fiddling with it right after he took it." Miller looked at the battered North Face bag in the overhead bin. "Is that your bag, son?" "Yes," Rowan said quietly. "Do I have your permission to search it?" Rowan hesitated. He had confidential intellectual property on his hard drives, proprietary code for his startup. "Officer, that bag contains sensitive business materials. I run a tech company." Laughter. Elena laughed triumphantly. "He's refusing. That's guilt. That is an admission of guilt." "Open it, sir." Miller set his hand on his taser. "If you don't consent, we will detain you and get a warrant, and you will miss this flight and spend the night in a cell. If you have nothing to hide, let us look." Rowan closed his eyes. He exhaled a shaky breath. "Fine. Search it, but please be careful with the electronics." Miller grabbed the bag. He didn't be careful. He upended it onto Rowan's seat. Out tumbled a tangle of expensive cables, 2 portable hard drives, a noise-cancelling headset, a bag of trail mix, and the thick, custom-built Linux laptop. Miller shook the bag upside down. Nothing else fell out. He began sifting through the pockets of the bag, opening the small zippers, checking the lining. "It's not here," Miller said, looking at Elena. Elena's face went pale, then red. "Look harder. He has a secret pocket, or maybe he swallowed it." "Mom," Miller said, looking annoyed. "We can't x-ray him on the plane. We've searched him and his property. The bracelet isn't here. Then he passed it to someone." Elena spun around, looking at the other passengers. "He has an accomplice. Maybe the flight attendant took it. She was very friendly with him." Sarah gasped. "Mrs. Vance, that is absurd." Captain Anderson had seen enough. He stepped out of the cockpit again. He had been listening to the entire exchange. He looked at the chaos, the scattered electronics, The barefoot teenager, the hysterical woman. Officer Miller. Captain Anderson said, his voice cutting through the noise. A word, please. The captain beckoned the police sergeant into the galley away from Elena and Rowan. They spoke in hushed tones. Anderson pointed at the ceiling of the cabin, then at Elena, then at the floor. Miller nodded slowly. He adjusted his belt. When they returned to the aisle, the dynamic had changed. Miller wasn't looking at Rowan anymore. He was looking at Elena. Mrs. Vance, Miller said, "Are you absolutely certain you had the bracelet on when you boarded?" "Yes, I told you I never take it off," Elena shouted. "Why aren't you arresting him? He obviously hid it on the plane somewhere, tear the seat apart." "We aren't going to do that, ma'am," Miller said. "Then I will call my husband." Elena pulled out her phone. "Robert Vance will have all of your badges. This is incompetence." "Mrs. Vance," Captain Anderson interrupted. "Before you make that call, I think there is something you should know." He pointed a finger upward toward a small black dome in the ceiling of the first-class cabin right above the partition between rows 1 and 2. "Since the retrofit last year," the captain said calmly, "this aircraft is equipped with high-resolution security cameras in the premium cabins to monitor for passenger safety and liability. We have a direct feed in the cockpit." Elena froze. Her phone hovered in her hand. "I just reviewed the footage from the last 30 minutes with the first officer." Captain Anderson continued, his voice turning to ice. "The footage is very clear, Mrs. Vance." The cabin went deadly silent. And Elena whispered, her voice trembling, but not with anger this time, with fear, and the captain said, crossing his arms, "We saw exactly what happened to the bracelet." The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a pendulum swinging back the other way. Captain Anderson didn't blink. He held his ground in the aisle, looking down at Elena Vance, who was now clutching her chest. Her face a mask of pale foundation and panic. "Footage." Elena squeaked. That's impossible. You're bluffing. Planes don't have cameras inside. That's an invasion of privacy. On international wide-body aircraft, specifically in premium cabins where theft and liability are high-risk concerns. We absolutely do. Captain Anderson said, his voice level but hard as granite, and the privacy laws allow it because this is a secured environment. And frankly, Mrs. Vance, right now, you should be very worried about what that camera saw. Sergeant Miller, the police officer, who had just aggressively searched Rowan, stepped away from the young man. His demeanor changed instantly. He looked at the captain. "Captain, be specific. What did you see?" Captain Anderson pulled a small tablet from his jacket pocket. He tapped the screen and held it up not to Elena, but to Sergeant Miller. "Watch the timestamp," Anderson narrated, pointing at the gritty but clear black and white video. "This is 14 minutes ago. We are pushing back." Mrs. Vance is agitated. She opens her Birkin bag. Watch her left hand. Miller leaned in, his eyes narrowing. The other two officers crowded around. Even Mr. Sterling in seat 1A craned his neck. "She isn't sleeping," Miller muttered, watching the screen. "She's looking around." "Exactly," Anderson said. "She checks to see if Mr. Hollet is watching. He isn't. He has his headphones on, looking out the window. Now watch." On the screen, the digital version of Elena Vance moved with quick, surreptitious purpose. She reached for her left wrist. She didn't yank the bracelet. She carefully unclasped the safety latch. It took her 3 tries. "She took it off," Miller said, his voice rising in disbelief. "She didn't lose it. She took the damn thing off." "Keep watching," the captain commanded. On the screen, Elena held the diamond bracelet in her palm. She looked at the open gap between her seat cushion and the console of her suite, a dark, hard-to-reach crevice where crumbs and lost phones usually go. She shoved the bracelet deep into the gap using a nail file to push it further down until it was completely invisible. Then she sat back, waited 10 seconds, and let out the scream that had stopped the plane. Captain Anderson lowered the tablet. He looked at Elena with profound disappointment. "You stopped a 300-ton aircraft, delayed 300 passengers, and accused an innocent young man of a felony. All for what? to prove a point to exercise some twisted power trip. Elena was trembling so hard, her Chanel suit was vibrating. It's a deep fake, she stammered, grasping at straws. That video is doctored. You're all working together. You're protecting him because of affirmative action. This is a conspiracy. Sergeant Miller turned to her. The look on his face was terrifying. It was the look of a man who realized he had been used as a weapon against an innocent person. He had humiliated Rowan based on this woman's lies. And now he was furious. "Mrs. Vance," Miller said, his voice dropping an octave. "Stand up. I will not," she shrieked. "I want my lawyer. I am a victim. Stand up." Miller barked. Elena scrambled out of her seat, backing into the aisle. Officer Davis, Miller said to his partner, "Check the seat left side between the cushion and the console." Officer Davis, a younger cop who had been silent until now, stepped into Elena's suite. He pulled out a flashlight. He dug his hand into the crevice. He grunted, reaching deeper. "It's tight," Davis muttered. "She really jammed it in there. I don't know how that got there." Elena wailed, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of terror. "It must have fallen off when I was sleeping and slid down." "We have video of you pushing it in with a nail file, Mom," Miller said coldly. "Got it," Davis said. He pulled his hand out. In his palm, glittering under the LED cabin lights, was the vintage Cartier diamond tennis bracelet. Officer Davis held it up. Found exactly where the captain said. The cabin was silent for one heartbeat. Then Rowan Holloway, who was still standing in the aisle in his socks, surrounded by his scattered electronics, spoke up. "It wasn't about the bracelet," Rowan said softly. Everyone turned to him. "She didn't want the money," Rowan said, looking at Elena with a mix of pity and exhaustion. "She just wanted to see me walk off this plane in handcuffs. She couldn't stand the fact that I was in the same space as her." Elena's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She had no defense. The evidence was physical, digital, and overwhelming. Sergeant Miller took a deep breath. He turned to Rowan. "Son, Mr. Holloway, I owe you a massive apology. I should have verified before I searched you. I was following protocol for a theft in progress, but I was wrong." "It's okay," Clear's throat, Rowan said. Through his voice was tight. "Just can I put my shoes back on now?" "Yes," Miller said. "Please." Then Miller turned to Elena. He reached for his belt. He unclipped a pair of heavy steel handcuffs. "Ian Vance," Miller said, stepping into her personal space. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "You cannot arrest me!" Elena screamed, backing away until she bumped into the galley wall. "Do you know who my husband is?" Zab advanced. "He plays golf with the police commissioner. If you touch me, I will sue you. I will sue this airline, and I will have your badge." "Mrs. Vance, you are making this significantly worse," Captain Anderson warned. "I am not going to jail," she spat. "I am going to London. I have a gala to attend." Sergeant Miller didn't have time for the Robert Vance card. He grabbed her wrist. He didn't do it gently. He spun her around. "You are under arrest." Miller recited the metallic click-click of the handcuffs, echoing through the quiet cabin, for filing a false police report meant to incite a law enforcement response for interference with a flight crew, which is a federal offense, and for disorderly conduct. "This hurts." "You're hurting me," Elena cried, thrashing against the restraint. "You have the right to remain silent." Miller continued, tightening the cuffs to ensure she couldn't slip them. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And frankly, ma'am, given that you're on camera committing the crime, I'd suggest you use that right to remain silent starting right now. Call Robert," she yelled at Sarah, the flight attendant. "Sarah, call my husband. Tell him I've been kidnapped." Sarah stood with her hands, Clear's throat, clasped in front of her. She looked at the woman who had belittled her, threatened her job, and abused a fellow passenger. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance," Sarah said coolly. "Using personal electronic devices is prohibited during critical phases of flight, and for you, this flight is over." Miller and Officer Davis grabbed Elena by the elbows. "Let's go," Miller said. My bag, my Birkin. Ella Lenana screamed as they began to march her forward. We'll bring it as evidence, Officer Davis said, slinging the crimson bag over his shoulder. The walk of shame was brutal. To get off the plane, they had to walk back through the business class cabin to the second door as the jet bridge had been reattached there. The curtain was pulled back. 50 faces looked up. These were the people who had been delayed, who had heard the screaming, who had sat on the tarmac for 40 minutes because of her. As Alella was Frog marched down the aisle, dishevelled, red-faced and handcuffed, someone in row 5 started a slow clap. Then someone else joined in. Then another. Bye, Karen, someone shouted from the back. Have fun in jail, another voice called out. Phones were raised like a salute of black mirrors. Flashbulbs went off. Ella Lenana Vance was being live-reamed to Instagram, TikTok and Twitter. By the time she reached the police precinct, she would already be a trending topic. She tried to hold her head up, tried to summon that icy arrogance, but it was gone. She looked small. She looked defeated. She looked exactly like what she was, a criminal. Back in first class, the atmosphere decompressed instantly. Captain Anderson stayed behind for a moment. He walked over to seat 2A. Rowan was sitting on the edge of his seat, tying his laces. His hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline crash. Mr. Hollow, Captain Anderson said, removing his hat. I have flown for 30 years. I have seen bad behaviour, but I have never seen someone targeted with such malice. Rowan looked up. I just wanted to get to London, Captain. I know, Anderson said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. This is my personal card. If you need anything, a witness statement for a lawsuit, a character reference, anything, you call me. I will testify against her with pleasure. Thank you, Sir Rowan said. Also, Anderson gestured to Sarah. We need to refuel, which gives us about 20 minutes. Sarah, bring the champagne, the real champagne, and bring the caviar service. Already on it, Captain. Sarah beamed. And Mr. Hollet, the captain added, I know you paid for this seat, but I'm going to refund your ticket personally, and I'm marking your account for global services status. You'll never wait in a line again. Rowan smiled a genuine tinned smile. You don't have to do that. I do, Anderson said, because that woman tried to break you, and she failed. You handled yourself with more dignity than she has had in her entire life. The captain returned to the cockpit to prepare for the real departure. As the door closed, Mr. Sterling in seat 1A leaned over the divider. Hey, kid. Rowan right. Yeah, Rowan said, accepting a glass of water from Sarah. You said you run a cybersecurity firm dealing with quantum encryption. That's right, Rowan said. CypherX? We're a startup. Sterling laughed. CypherX, I read about you guys in TechCrunch. You're the ones who cracked the bank firewall challenge last month. That was us. Rowan nodded. Sterling extended a hand. I'm David Sterling, CEO of Nebulink. We're looking to acquire a security division. I was going to London to meet with some stiff corporate types, but I think I'd rather talk to you. Rowan shook his hand. I'm listening. How about we discuss a buyout price over dinner? Sterling grinned. My treat, since you know you almost went to jail. Rowan chuckled. The nightmare was over. The engines began to whine, rising in pitch. The plane began to move, but the story wasn't quite done. Because while Rowan was sipping vintage Dom Perino and discussing a multi-million-dollar deal, Elena, Vance was in the back of a squad car, wet from the rain, watching the plane. Her plane soar into the grey sky without her, and her phone, which Officer Miller had confiscated, buzzed in the evidence bag. It was a text from her husband, Robert Vance. LEY is Hashant First Class Karen trending on Twitter. And why does the woman in the handcuffs look like you? Call me immediately. The shareholders are watching. Karma hadn't just hit. It had completely obliterated the target. The wheels of Flight 999 touched down at London Heathrow with a gentle thud, a stark contrast to the violent turbulence that had occurred on the ground in New York 7 hours earlier. For most passengers, the landing signaled the end of a long journey. For Rowan Holloway, it signaled the beginning of a new life. As the plane taxied to Terminal 2, the cabin was quiet, but the energy had shifted. The flight attendants, usually brisk and professional, treated Rowan with a reverence typically reserved for royalty or rock stars. Sarah stopped by seat 2A one last time. "Mr. Holay," she said, handing him a small, heavy bag with the airline's logo. "Captain Anderson wanted you to have this. It's a bottle of the vintage Krug from our private stock. He said to save it for your celebration tonight." Rowan took the bag, feeling the weight of the gesture. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." Beside him, David Sterling, the CEO of Nebu Link, was packing up his briefcase. The cocktail napkin with the preliminary figures $12 million acquisition on stock options CTO. Rowe was tucked safely inside his jacket pocket. "You ready for this, kid?" Sterling asked, adjusting his cuffs. "London can be intense." "I think I've handled enough intensity for one day," Rowan replied with a tired smile. When Rowan finally turned on his phone, the device nearly froze from the influx of notifications. His screen was a blur of Twitter mentions, Instagram tags, and missed calls. He opened Twitter and saw the hashtag #DFFirstAskKaren trending at #1 globally. Below it, trending at #3, was Juck Team Rowan. Clear's throat. He clicked a link. It was the video. The footage of Elena Vance being Frog marched down the aisle screaming about her Birkin bag had been viewed 4.5 million times in 7 hours. The comments were a landslide of support for him, and vitriol for her. "Looks like your famous," Sterling noted, glancing at the screen. "That's good. It's free marketing for the merger." They walked off the plane together. But while Rowan was walking toward a future of millions, Elena Vance was sitting in a reality of cold concrete and steel. Queens, New York. 4. Hinso. The holding cell at Queens Central Booking smelled of industrial cleaner and stale despair. It was a smell that Elena Vance had never encountered in her 55 years of life. She sat on the edge of a steel bench, her knees pulled to her chest. Her cream-coloured Chanel suit was stained with something dark she had brushed against in the paddy wagon. Her signature blonde bob was flat and dishevelled. She was shivering, but not from the cold. She was withdrawing from the adrenaline, the champagne, and the sheer delusion of power that had sustained her for decades. Vance, a correction officer, barked from the other side of the bars. "Lawyers here. Front desk." Elena scrambled up her heels, clicking on the concrete floor. A hollow, pathetic sound compared to the aggressive clicks on the jet bridge. She was led to a partitioned room where a man in a sharp suit was waiting. It wasn't her usual attorney, the friendly Mr. Henderson, who handled her estate planning. It was a man she didn't recognize. "Where is Robert Elena?" asked her voice cracking. "Why isn't he here?" The lawyer, a man named Arthur Cole, didn't stand up. He didn't offer a hand. He opened a folder. "Mr. Vance is currently in an emergency meeting with the board of directors of Vance Global." Cole said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "The stock opened in pre-market trading down 6%. The video of your arrest has been picked up by CNN, BBC, and Fox News. It is playing on a loop." "It's a misunderstanding," Elena cried, gripping the edge of the table. "I was tired. I made a mistake. Robert can fix this. He knows the police commissioner." Cole looked up, his eyes cold behind rimless glasses. "Mrs. Vance, the commissioner issued a statement an hour ago commending the officers for their unbiased handling of a disturbance involving a high-profile individual. He is distancing himself from you. Everyone," as he slid a document across the table. "What is this?" she whispered. "Bail paperwork and a non-disclosure agreement regarding the internal affairs of Vance Global," Cole explained. "Robert has instructed me to take you directly to the Hamptons estate. You are not to return to the Manhattan penthouse. There are protesters outside the building." "Protesters?" Elena gasped. "Yes, people with signs." "It's quite ugly," Cole said, checking his watch. "You are to stay in the Hamptons. You will deactivate all social media accounts immediately. You will not speak to the press. Robert will visit you on the weekend with his personal divorce counsel." The air left the room. Elena slumped back in her chair. "Divorce over a bracelet." "Not over a bracelet, Mrs." Vance, Cole said, closing his folder. Over the fact that you have become a liability in Robert's world, liabilities are liquidated. 3 months later, London. The main stage of the TechCrunch Disrupt conference was bathed in blue and purple light. 2,000 people sat in the darkened auditorium, their faces illuminated by the glow of laptops and tablets. Rowan Holloway stood center stage. He looked different than the boy in the hoodie. He wore a fitted navy suit, though he had kept the retro Jordans a trademark of his new status as a tech disruptor. So Rowan said into the headset microphone, his voice amplified and confident. When we talk about encryption, we usually talk about protecting data from thieves. But at CypherX now, a division of Nebulink, we realized that the most dangerous breaches don't come from code. They come from bias. He clicked a remote. The massive screen behind him displayed a complex web of code. But in the center, a simple image, a locked door. Real security is knowing who to let in and who to keep out based on credentials, not assumptions. Rowan continued. We've built an identity verification protocol that is blind to demographics and focuses purely on behavioral metrics. We call it the 99 Protocol. A ripple of laughter and applause went through the crowd. They knew the reference. I'd like to bring out two people who helped inspire this journey, Rowan said, smiling. Please welcome my mother Sheila Holay, and the man who taught me that authority means nothing without integrity, Captain James Anderson. The crowd erupted. Captain Anderson, in full uniform, walked onto the stage escorting Rowan's mother. Sheila looked radiant, tears streaming down her face as she hugged her son. Anderson shook Rowan's hand, gripping it firmly. You did good, Onson. Anderson said, his voice audible over the microphone. You did real good. Rowan looked out at the sea of people. He thought about the rain at JFK. He thought about the way Ellen Naina looked at him like he was dirt. And he realized that without her hate, he wouldn't be standing here bathed in this love. Back in New York, the Queens County Courthouse was a circus. Elena Vance had hoped the news cycle would move on in 3 months. It hadn't. She stood before Judge Maria Gonzalez, a no-nonsense jurist who had little patience for the entitled elite. Elena looked aged. She had lost weight. The silence of the Hamptons house, where the phone never rang, had eaten away at her. Mrs. Vance, Judge Gonzalez said, reading from the file, you pleaded no contest to filing a false report and disorderly conduct, but I want to be clear about what actually happened. You tried to weaponize the police against a young man because of your own prejudice. You wanted to destroy his future to satisfy your ego. I'm sorry, Your Honor, Elena whispered. It was a rehearsed line coached by her lawyer, but her voice was hollow. I am sentencing you to 3 years of probation. The judge ruled, slamming the gavel. You will complete 500 hours of community service and not at a cushy charity gala. You will be serving in the sanitation department's litter removal program. Clears throat. You will clean up the mess just as you forced others to clean up yours today. The sound of the gavel striking the wood was the final nail in the coffin of Elena's old life. As she left the courthouse shielding her face from the cameras, she saw a news ticker on a digital billboard across the street. Breaking news. Nebu Link acquires CypherX for $12 million. 19-year-old CEO Rowan Holloway to head new security division. Elena stopped. She stared at the billboard. The face of the boy she had tried to get arrested was beaming down at her, larger than life, triumphant. She lowered her head, stepped into the waiting black car, and closed the door. But she couldn't shut out the truth. She had tried to push him down, and in doing so, she had pushed him right to the top. Karma hadn't just hit back. It had settled the score with interest. And that is the story of Rowan, and the flight that changed everything. It's a powerful reminder that dignity is quiet, while insecurity is loud. Elena Vance thought her wealth gave her the right to judge Rowan, but all it did was buy her a front-row seat to her own downfall. Rowan, on the other hand, kept his cool, knew his worth, and let the truth and a well-placed security camera do the fighting for him. It makes you wonder, how many times has this happened without a camera rolling? How many people like Rowan have had their days ruined or their lives altered just because someone else felt threatened by their existence. This story isn't just about karma, it's about character. It's about the fact that true class has nothing to do with the price of your ticket and everything to do with how you treat the people around you. What would you have done if you were Rowan? Would you have kept your cool? Or would you have snapped? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that karma is always watching. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay kind, and fly.